Hello and welcome to video tutorial number 3, learning Visual Basic. And in this tutorial we're going to be covering if statements. Now, in the last tutorial, if you watched that, if you haven't, go back and watch it. You learnt what variables are and you learnt how to write things and read things from the console screen. And before we can get on to making basic programs, we're going to have to learn a couple more things, such as if statements, which will be covered in this video. And in the next video I'll probably be looking at iterations such as loops and things like that. And once you know those basic things, we can put those together and we'll get making maybe a basic calculator or something along those lines. So what I'm going to do now is just declare a couple of variables, and if you want to do this with me and see how it goes, then feel free to do that as well. So what I'll show you in this video is what an if statement is. And an if statement is basically a selection, so it compares two things and it gives out a true or a false value. So say for instance, in the last video we saw how to dim or create a variable. Now we'll dim num1 again as an integer, and we'll dim num2 again as an integer. Now say for instance, instead of just adding these two values together or timesing them or doing whatever you're doing with them, if you want to compare the values, say is num1 bigger than num2 or is num1 equal to num2, then this is how we would do that. So let's give num1 and num2 a value. Num1 equals 5 and num2 equals num2 equals 10. So we want to ask, is num1 bigger than num2? Obviously we can see there that it's not. So let's put if, and that's the selection statement. Sorry, not the statement, it's the operator sort of thing. If num1 is bigger than num2. Now this sign here, I don't know, you'd probably be familiar with it, but num1 is greater than, the big end is towards num1, so it's greater. And this one, num1 is less than num2. So if num1 is greater than num2, then, and then hit enter, and that'll bring you to the next line, and it also automatically puts in end if in. Now you don't need to worry about that for now. So basically what that means is that if num1, 5, is bigger than num2, 10, then do what's inside of this. So in here, do what's in here. And we'll say console.writeLine speech mark and say num1 is bigger than num2. And let's just run that now, and at the end as well we'll put a console read line so it doesn't just end straight away. Run this, and nothing comes up. And nothing comes up because num1 is not bigger than num2. 5 is less than 10. And because this statement isn't true, this doesn't actually get written out to the screen. So if num1 is less than num2, which it is, 5 is less than 10, it will do this part of the code. And we'll run it now. Oops, pardon me, I put num1 is bigger, smaller. Num1 is smaller than num2. It displays this code because num1 is smaller than num2. We can also write an else. So if this is true, then it runs this. But if it's not true, then it will run this. So then we can write console.writeLine num1 is bigger than num2. So if num1 is less than num2, then if that's true, it's going to be smaller than num2. And if it's false, then num1 is automatically, by logic, bigger than num2. So let's change these around. Let's set num1 to 50. So now num1 is bigger than num2. So if we test that, if num1 is smaller than num2, it's not. So it won't run this, and instead it will run this. and as we can see, num1 is bigger than num2, which is correct. So now you've seen how you can apply these statements. You can also write things such as if num1 equals num2, and that's pretty much all you need to know. So yeah, that's basically that, and you can apply this in many situations. You can also do, for instance, an else if, and give another statement, num2 is equal to num1, or num1 is equal to num2 rather. Num1 is equal to num2. So you can create cases for everything. Every situation that might crop up, you can create a case for and provide an answer on screen. And this is going to come in useful when you want to create larger programs, because in almost every program you're going to want to write, you're going to have to test whether two variables are the same, different, or larger or smaller than one another. And you'll see this more effectively when we come to build a calculator. So that's the overview of an if statement, and in the next video I'll be looking at iterations such as loops. So thanks a lot for watching, subscribe to the channel and thumbs up the video. Cheers!